Today, we're going to dive into the intellectual architecture of one of Brazil's most important thinkers, Gilberto Freyre. We're going to look at the foundations of his work and really get into his game-changing definition of culture.
All right, so first things first, let's get a handle on why Freyre is such a monumental figure in the social sciences.
Look, to put it simply, you really can't understand modern Brazil without getting a grip on Gilberto Freyre. He is a true giant of 20th century thought, and his work casts this incredibly long shadow, shaping anthropology not just in Brazil but all around the world.
But, every great structure needs a solid foundation. And for Freyre, that foundation wasn't laid in Brazil. It was actually built during his time studying in the United States.
So, while he was at Columbia University, Freyre was just captivated by the ideas of Franz Boas, the father of American anthropology. Now, he was never formally Boas' student, but he was in those lectures all the time, just soaking it all in. And this intellectual mentorship, it was absolutely decisive. It was this constant contact with Boas that gave Freyre the solid theoretical tools he needed to write his masterworks, like the famous Casa-Grande Senzala. And in doing so, he literally changed how Brazil saw itself.
Okay, now for the really good stuff.
Let's dive into the blueprint itself, Freyre's formal definition of culture. This is pretty much the core of his entire intellectual project.
What's really interesting is that even though these revolutionary ideas about culture were driving his famous books back in the 1930s, Freyre didn't actually publish a formal written-down definition until the 1970s.
And here it is. In his own words, Freyre saw culture, pretty simply, as the total collection of human inventions and all our developed skills. But of course, he didn't stop there.
He broke it down into two clear categories. On one side, you have the material, the tangible things, right? Techniques for building things, for hunting, for transport. And on the other side, you have the non-material, that whole intangible world of our beliefs and ideas.
His next big idea was that this universal human ability to create culture always shows up in specific, different sets. So you end up with distinct cultures, like the Mayan, or the French, or the Islamic culture. Each one a unique expression of that basic human drive to invent and create.
And to help us analyze all these different sets, he gave us this brilliant analytical tool he called the complex of culture. Now this is a key part of his blueprint.
So here's how it works. Think of a central idea, a motif, like coffee. The complex of culture around coffee includes everything from the farming techniques to the rituals in a coffee shop to global trade agreements. It's this whole interconnected web of practices that all stem from that one central thing.
Okay, so we've got the theory, we've got the blueprint. Now let's see how he actually used it to build his most famous and lasting works.
So here's the crucial point. A book like Casa-Grande Senzala isn't just a history book. It is his theory in action. It's a super detailed description of that entire set of inventions, both the material and non-material stuff, that all came together to form the unique culture of Brazil. And we see this exact same approach in his book, Nordeste. In this case, he applies that complex of culture concept directly to the central motif of sugarcane, and he shows how that one single plant shaped the entire life and landscape of Brazil's northeast.
Now, this focus on the relationship between the environment, the sugarcane, and the culture was so incredibly far ahead of its time that scholars today point to him as a pioneer, a forerunner of ecological anthropology.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Ecological anthropology didn't really show up as a formal field until the 1960s. Freyre was already putting its core ideas into practice way back in 1937. We're talking decades ahead of the curve.
So, what's the lasting impact of this intellectual architecture that Freyre so carefully built? Where does that leave us?
Well, the thing is, Freyre's framework for understanding culture, the one he built on that foundation from Boas, it didn't just describe Brazil's past. It gave us a powerful and really flexible new way to analyze the tangled connections inside any society. The bottom line is that the structure he built is still standing strong. It continues to provide a framework and really a kind of shelter for new ideas and debates in anthropology all across the world.
Which really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? How can we use Freyre's blueprint, this idea of material and non-material inventions built around these central motifs, to get a better handle on the complex cultures that we're all living in right now?